No country has ever prospered that failed to put its own interests first. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism.
New Right Network presents Right Now, the featured podcast of New Right Network. Mobilizing, countering the left, energizing the right. New Right Network, home of the New Right movement.
My name is Mary Magaline. I'm from New Right Network, and I am interviewing Catherine Hall today. Catherine Hall lost her daughter in 2016 in Arkansas. She's going to tell us her story today. Catherine, if you could tell us what happened. That's what we want to know first, is what happened.
It was November 6th, 2016. It was at about 7 o'clock in the evening. Hailey was on her way back home with a friend. She was riding as a passenger on a scooter. She was, like I said, a block from home, going straight down the road. A man driving a red Chevy Silverado, going 71 miles an hour in a 35, hit the kids from behind. Hailey taking the blunt of the impact to her head and her body. She flew up on the hood, and the boy went down underneath with the scooter and were lodged underneath. Hailey was on the hood for over 220 feet when he veered off into the left lane, we believe trying to knock her off, at which point she did fall off going 71 miles an hour. He never did slow down. She landed in the street. The driver kept going, drove for about another mile with the boy and the scooter trapped underneath. The boy's body finally came dislodged after he had his legs torn off of him. The driver then pulled in and hid the truck that he was driving. It had started causing sparks from the friction from the scooter underneath, and it was causing attention to him. So that's why he had turned in to hide it. He then got out and walked past both the kids in the street, never calling for help for them or offering to try to help the boy who, from my understanding, was in the driveway screaming for help. Behind where my daughter was left in the street, thankfully somebody coming up had seen her and stopped traffic from hitting her. And a ER physician happened to be one of the cars back behind, and he started life support on her at the scene. Hailey was taken to the hospital. The boy was found 7 or 8 minutes after Hailey was. This about 12:15 at night, I received a knock on the door, and it was police officers, and they told me that they had to ask me some questions to identify my daughter. I asked if she was dead or alive. They would not tell me. For 10 minutes, I had to stand there and try to ID any scars, marks, tattoos, anything on her, which to me, it was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Finally, I gave them enough, and she'd had a baby, and her baby's name was tattooed right above her heart, and that's what finally ID'd her. And at that point, they still didn't tell us too much. They just said we needed to go with them to the hospital. Hailey was in ICU. The boy was also in ICU. I believe he was still in surgery when we got there. Hailey survived for about another an hour and 45 minutes. The head injuries were so severe that she would have never survived. She could not survive. The internal bleeding, they could not stop. So we had to make that call at the last minute to try. They said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when her heart stops again. They'd already resuscitated her 3 times. I had to make that call at the last minute when her heart was going again, what to do. And I asked as the machines were going off, is there any chance whatsoever? And I already knew the answer because Hailey's eyes had been open the whole time. And in an hour and 45 minutes, she never blinked. So when that time came, like I said, I asked the doctors, is there a 1% chance anything? And all they could respond is, I'm sorry. I asked if there was anything left that we could donate, and because she did have 3 severe head injuries that were non-survivable, and there was nothing left to donate. So we sat with her, and I don't have a whole lot of memory after that. I know I woke up in the ER at some point, but so of course, we're asking questions, and they had not found the man. They believe they knew who he was because they had found the truck. They found the debris that was left behind from the scooter, and the blood that was leaving tire marks down the road. So they had the vehicle, they just didn't have the driver. It was 2 days later. Well, let me back up. For the next 2 days, the press had on, and it was running on the top or on the screen that they were looking for this man, and it was the first time I had seen a picture of him was that morning. 2 days later, the phone rang in the evening or afternoon, and they said that they had located him, and they wanted to let me know before the press got a hold of it, so that I was aware that they had him there at the police department. An hour and 45 minutes later, I get a phone call again telling me they had just released him, and that the only thing he was charged with was leaving the scene of an accident. I was devastated. The man only lived a mile from my house, so needless to say, my husband hid the keys and didn't want me driving, and upset going over there to confront him. But it was very difficult to know that he just killed my child, and at this point they did not expect the boy to survive, to know that they had just let him back on our streets and did not keep him in jail. You've just killed my daughter and possibly this boy who they're not expecting to make it, and he's at home with his child. I can't even explain the emotions that were going on. We went through 17 months before sentencing, and we were supposed to go to trial. I had gone to the press. I had done everything I could. I contacted my state legislators about the charges. In December 2017, over a year later, we finally got a second-degree murder charge on him and a battery charge for the boy who did survive. He is now a double amputee. In April, right before trial was to start, we were informed that they would be lowering the charges. A new prosecutor had come on. The one that had originally put the second-degree murder charges had retired. Now, during this time, let me back up a little bit again. I continually asked, because the first hearing he had interpreters there and did not speak any English. So I kept asking his status. Is he a U.S. citizen? I was really concerned about him running, not that for any other reason, but to find out, if he was a U.S. citizen. Is he going to try to flee the country and not face any charges? And we were told, oh, well, we're not sure. We don't know. And then finally we were told by one of the detectives, yes, he is illegal. So I kept asking continuously. I was very afraid this man would not stand justice. And I kept asking, please contact ICE. Has ICE been contacted? And then my husband and I and my attorney were called into a meeting, and we were informed at that time that if they were to contact ICE, he would be taken down to Louisiana and probably just deported and never face any kind of judicial hearings. So we said, okay, well, we understand that. We want him to have to pay for what he's done to my daughter, or answer for it. When the new prosecuting attorney had come in a few months later, he lowered all the charges down from second-degree battery. First-degree battery to second-degree battery, and then murder to manslaughter. And they were not going to have a trial. He was looking at 58 years originally. The new prosecutor brought it down to a plea deal for 17. 17 years still sounds great, but in all reality, he's doing just over 2 years before he's paroled. We were not happy about it. We did not have a choice. This man was able to hire one of the better attorneys in town with a $20,000 deposit, pay a bond of $25,000, and hire expert witnesses before the plea deal was done at $12,000. My husband is a disabled veteran, 26 years, retired Purple Heart veteran. He's 100% disabled. So I asked for restitution to be put into this. We were told no. We could not ask for restitution. Any fines all go to the court for all the work they had done or whatever. But subsequently, his fine was $280, $30 of which was for his DNA test. We did not agree, and neither did the boy who survived on a plea deal to begin with. We have videos of my daughter being hit. The prosecutor's office told us that they couldn't even prove my daughter was involved in all of this. They're going to be lucky to get a manslaughter charge out of it. They had a stronger case with David, and I said, Aloni, you mean to tell me that you can prove that he knew that the boy was trapped underneath, but he didn't know that my daughter was on the hood of the vehicle right in front of him? Baloney. But anyway, they didn't want to hear it, and he got the 17 years. That he will be he just went to jail on May 25th. He finally was checked into the prison system. He will be released February 7th of 2021, and that time keeps continually going down further. So before we know it, it'll be 2020 sometime for classes that he's taking in jail. I still have a hard time understanding to this day how it is that if you're not in this country legally and you commit such a heinous crime, how do we as a society say it's okay to give you bond and put you back on our streets where you should have never been to begin with? And I have a really big problem with that. And then to say, sentence somebody to 17 years, give them an early release on parole, when our own U.S. citizens that go to jail, they get released on parole, they're monitored, they're watched, they have to report in. This man is going to have to do none of it. He will be taken back to Mexico, in which, by the way, let me go back again. After sentencing and everything happened, there was still, they had told me once they had a guilty on him, then they would contact ICE at that time. 2.5 months after he had gotten to prison, there was still no hold on him, immigration hold. I contacted ICE and Voice myself, and then they finally called me back and said 100% he is illegal. They had, just before, at sentencing, they had said he is not a U.S. citizen, but he is a legal permanent resident. And I was completely confused in that. So when I talked to Voice, they did their research and said they allowed him to get married just before sentencing in December, right after the murder 2 charge had come down. He had had a big wedding and gotten married to a U.S. citizen and now has a child that is a U.S. citizen. And the man from Voice who called me, he was crying. He said, we were never contacted over this until you contacted us. Nobody has ever contacted us. But they do have the immigration hold on him. We don't know if the way the law is now, if he'll be able to return legally in 5 years because he married a U.S. citizen and now has a child here, or what is going to happen. And part of that restitution order that I had wanted to be granted would have made it so he could not return to this country until every penny of the restitution was paid, but they wouldn't allow me to do it. After all of this, I kept speaking with my state representatives and government people. And I was called to Arkansas, and I testified in front of the Arkansas State Judiciary there concerning my daughter's case. And they kind of went back and forth still, on his citizenship and stuff, but we'd already had everything in front of us. During that testimony, we found out from the Arkansas State Police who testified, there are 2 ICE holding facilities in the state of Arkansas. One of them is in Fayetteville where my daughter was killed. So the whole story in the beginning about he would be taken down to Louisiana to be held there was a complete lie. The jail in the county right there is one of the only 2 holding facilities. So, I don't understand why so many of these illegal immigrants are protected by our own government and our own people. And, it's giving us no justice. I mean, I have to live every single day knowing that my daughter's death could have been prevented. If there had been a wall and there had been, something, it could have been prevented. So,
Sorry, I had to.
It's okay.
So, a few things. First of all, they lied to you. They lied to you about his immigration.
They did.
They lied to you about ICE.
Yeah.
It sounds to me pretty much like you got the runaround. Is that how that?
Absolutely, 100%. I feel like he was protected through the whole thing. I was also threatened at one point. I wouldn't say it was a threat. It was said to me that after I kept asking questions about the immigration part and I had been to the press, it was mentioned that, well, you probably aren't going to be able to give a victim impact statement and be in the courtroom during trial. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, if you're called as a witness, then you cannot give a victim impact, or you can't be in the courtroom. And if you're going to give a victim impact statement, you can't be in the courtroom during the trial. And I said, well, why is that? I'm not a witness to anything. And the victim impact statement doesn't come until after the plea. So there's either you're not guilty. If he's not guilty, you don't give a victim impact statement. I felt that it was a threat towards, for me to be quiet. And
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. Give your victim impact statement, please. Can you tell us?
My victim impact statement?
Yeah, just make they denied you a victim impact statement. I want to give you a chance.
I wasn't able to do it because there was no trial. They did the plea deal. So I wasn't able to do it. But, that was pretty much when I kept questioning everything going on. That was the response that I got back out of it. So it wasn't like this just came up and they told me about it. It was as I was saying, I'm going back to the press. I want answers. I want to know about ICE. That's when that was the response that I had gotten to it. And I have emails. It wasn't just.
Oh, yes, I want those.
I've got them.
Okay. So they denied you a victim impact statement. Do you want to make one here now? What would you say to him if you're looking at him?
No, I actually did give one in sentencing because it didn't go to trial. I did give a victim impact statement, and I have it on recording through the whole thing and the boys' impact statement. After sentencing, when he was sentenced that day, they went ahead and allowed him, said he was not a flight risk, even though he's not a U.S. citizen and everything else, but let him go home for another 2 weeks to get his affairs in order. And I have the recording from the courtroom that day, and I told, I spoke out and I said, wait a minute, my daughter didn't get 2 weeks to take care of, get her affairs in order before she was killed.
Right.
He's been free for 17 months. Why would you give him another 2 weeks? And then the statement came that, well, there's no beds available in the jail and it's a matter of space and so forth. And we checked that night. Later that night, there was 19 arrests and some of them were for unpaid traffic tickets.
Oh, bless my soul.
For the man who killed. So, it was.
Your daughter?
Pardon me?
Tell us about your Tell us about your daughter.
Well, Hailey was 18 years old when she died. Um, she was born at 30 weeks, and they did not think she was going to survive. When she was born in Oregon, there was no NICU unit there, and so she had lack of oxygen for a while. And then we were told she could be have some brain damage, be blind or deaf. They didn't really know anything at the time. Hailey was a fighter. She survived. The only problem that they were seeing was some hearing issues. Um, then she had come down with RSV before a year old and was in the hospital and was critical. And she fought that and she survived. She was hard of hearing. She had a 75% hearing loss. She was going when she died. She was only a few months out from getting cochlear implants. And Hailey was out of the youngest of four of my children, and she was the one that was always laughing, always happy. Um, she was an awesome little girl. She played softball. She was a cheerleader. Um, she caught a lot of problems from the kids in school because of her speech. But when we had moved back to Arkansas, thinking it would be maybe better for her as a teenage girl, after my husband had been hit in Iraq, to be in a smaller town area, and it would just we just thought maybe through her high school years it would be easier, um, and it wasn't for her. It was hard for her. She struggled, and she ended up having a child at an early age, and the father just kind of took off, and she had this baby, and she was everything to her, everything. And through all of this, after Hailey died, we had filed for to adopt the baby, and the father wanted the baby also. And I can't really go into a lot of details about this, but the state did an illegal adoption and gave her to non-family members that worked out at Walmart, and we haven't seen her since. We weren't even allowed to step in the courtroom. We never got our day in court. The court still have not notified us of the adoption. I found pictures online. The father thought she was with me. He dropped out thinking she was going to be with us, and it's a long, drawn out story, and I can get into it later after my attorney gives me the okay. So
Okay, yeah, we're gonna want that story too.
it is.
Yeah.
It is like, when I found the pictures of the adoption that was done on her, and we're waiting for our second time in court. The first time we called the meeting, and it was January, right after she died, and we were up at the front table for our hearing, and we were never addressed, like we weren't even there. The foster family was there, and they asked if she was adoptable. They kept saying yes, and I kept writing on the pad of paper to my attorney saying, why are you not saying anything? And he said, this isn't our case. They're just clearing the way for the adoption, and we're going to be heard next. The judge called a recess, and the bailiff came out when we walked out of the doors and said, that's it, court's over for the day.
Oh, wow.
Fired the attorney. We hired another one, and we were waiting on a court date, and it was 7 months later, July 2017, and I knew the name of the people that they had her with, and I pulled up their Facebook, and there was a picture of her, and I was so excited to see it. And she was standing in front of a sign, and it said adoption day, and it was like that night that Hailey died all over again.
Right.
It was very,
Right.
And I of course got a hold of my attorney and everybody else, and we are shortly after that they fled the state with her, and we're fighting to get her back.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got 9 minutes left on our video. Take 5 of it and just speak from your heart. Address whoever you wish to. Say whatever you want. Okay.
My Hailey was always happy. She loved everybody. She tried to help all of her friends, anybody she ever could. I feel like Hailey has pushed me in the direction to get her story out there, to maybe help save somebody else from the same kind of fate that she did. She didn't deserve to die. she didn't deserve what happened to her and what has happened to my family since. It has been a living hell now for over 2 years. And then to have our own country protect the man who did this and act like we were doing something wrong, it's absolutely crazy. You know, there's been so much about build the wall. Yes, please build the wall, but we need to fix our own judicial system from inside because it shouldn't be this way. My husband was in the Army for 26 years. He was injured in Iraq, almost killed, received a Purple Heart. And he still says to this day that at least in a war zone, you knew who your enemy was. You know, he almost gave his life to protect us and to fight for this country, for them to turn their backs and our own child be killed here at home by somebody not from this country or that should not have been in this. It really eats at you every single day. Hailey's death is never going to make any real sense to us. You know, maybe if her story gets out there and people understand and we get something done, you know, maybe that can make the difference and help the healing a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
You've been listening to New Right Network, mobilizing, countering, energizing. Online at newrightnetwork.com.